Great to see you all. So one reason I love following Candace is that I can actually draw this connection. If she's talking about the future of education, what happens as we become educated, as we move forward? What does this connect to? And I'm going to talk about work, because I think that this is going to be really, really deeply changing in the next few years. For a number of years, our relationship with work and with the computer has been that work comes to me from around in the world, from my boss, from myself. I'm intrinsically motivated, whatever it would be. And what do? I turn to the computer and I get it done. I fire up the spreadsheet, something like this. I finish it. And that was the end of it. But because the computer was programmable, we could design that relationship. We could make the computer work such that the doing of that work was fluid, was powerful, right? But that relationship is shifting. No longer is work coming from me or from my boss in this offline world. Now work is coming from other people on the network. We are digitally mediated. This is Uber, where someone else wants a ride and I can give them a ride. This is Amazon Mechanical Turk, where I have work to do and someone else around the world is willing to help me fill out the spreadsheet. This is growing and becoming bigger and bigger. So we have this opportunity to think about what happens when work itself becomes networked and digitally mediated, right? The future of all of our careers could be involved here. And in fact, economists have estimated that something on the order of 20% of United States jobs could be done, so to speak, over the wire, which works out to something like 45 million people in the United States, whose lives could look a lot like what Uber looks like today. And faced with this challenge, what we have done as a community is basically get people to talk. So, right, we've put people into a chat room. And don't get me wrong, that's extremely powerful, right? Just putting people into a chat room has created something like the largest encyclopedia in the history of mankind. But, and a big but, if I could summarize the last 40 years or so of organizational behavior research, it's that when you leave us to our own in a chat room, so to speak, to organize ourselves, we're not so good at it. We fail to foresee how difficult it's going to be to integrate our efforts later. Most teams is documented if they're given 100% of the time, first 50%, not much gets done, second 50%, everyone really pushes. Just like in judgment and decision making, there are heuristics and biases that might be evolutionarily great in many scenarios, but often lead us astray. So too are we really, really bad at estimating how we should coordinate. So here I see an opportunity. Because now that the work is being digitally mediated, just like we could design the interface when it was just me and my spreadsheet, so too can we design the technological affordances of how we coordinate. Imagine if we could design some of the best practices and knowledge in such that the computer could help us organize ourselves most effectively to get things done. Put in words, I see a huge opportunity for computing to help us come together to tackle bigger, harder problems than we ever could before. So if you're familiar with this, it's been called crowdsourcing. Generally, the idea is that you take a small task or a lot of work, you split it up into a bunch of small tasks, you give it to a bunch of, well, small people, I guess, who all look the same, and get it done in parallel. And this is incredibly powerful. My own group has even demonstrated how you can create new kinds of user interfaces based on this. So you can take Microsoft Word, send your text out to the crowd, get suggestions about how you could rewrite it more briefly, and then we could computationally rewire it back together into a user interface, give you a slider, and then the next time you have to submit this thing on a deadline, you drag the slider around and the crowd's rewrites make your text get shorter or longer on demand, right? Available paid through the crowd, just essentially through an API. So there are a lot of opportunities here, but I would add that there are many scenarios in which this really doesn't work. There are many the kinds of things that I think you care about and I care about cannot be split up into a bunch of little small boxes. They're really, really big, interrelated, interdependent tasks. Design, engineering, writing. I would say that a lot of the things that Candace was just mentioning as well. They cannot be split up like this, but we still would really like to be able to do them. So what I would like to convince you today is that it is possible to crowdsource many of these very interdependent and expert-driven activities. I'll give you just one sense of what's going on. I'm going to take a deep dive into one project, which my student Daniela Ratelny did. And largely the idea here was to take a sort of contrarian stance. I teach user interface design, so I deal a lot with napkin sketches. We wondered, could we take a napkin sketch and convey that thing through the entire user-centered design process? Low fidelity prototype, get some feedback, implement it, user test it, revise that prototype, all the way through, give you a working user-tested prototype in a day. This takes 10 weeks in my class. Can we do it in a day? Likewise, could we crowdsource the creation of an animated short video in something like 48 hours? Or could we pull this together? A lot of my colleagues in the computer science department seem to be creating MOOCs these days, so I was like, all right, I'll make one too. For totally useless tasks like singing from the diaphragm, doing portrait photography, and so on. Could we crowdsource the creation of this extremely rapidly and at high quality? And if there's anything I'd like you to take away from this, it's a major shift from viewing the crowd as a bunch of sort of unwashed masses, people who all look the same and have basically general cognitive equipment, to a set of experts and professionals who might be networked and available on demand. Imagine on platforms today, like Upwork, you can get programmers, you can get designers, you can get, we've gotten opera singers. Really, all manner of professional expertise is available on demand in some unusual sense through an API. So if you remember anything, I'd like you to make this shift in your heads. Because once you make this shift, a lot becomes possible. All of these techniques that we've developed for crowdsourcing don't really work when people have complementary expertise and we assume that they know what they're doing. Unfortunately, also, these folks who are experts tend to work individually, right? They're uncoordinated. I'm a freelancer, I do my own thing. We want to ask, could we bring them together to tackle harder problems than they ever could in isolation? You might say, why not just pull them into a room together? That works, great. War rooms. Turns out, again, the organizational behavior literature tells us that, well, quote, inefficient, riddled with frustrated members, and poorly coordinated. So that might remind you of high school projects or projects at your organizations. What's remarkable is how little structure is actually necessary in order to do better. These are known in some circles as team scaffolds, and what it indicates is that all you really need are clearly specified roles and bounded goals that we have collective responsibility for to produce a team that way outperforms these ad hoc war room kind of teams. So what I want to pitch to you is this opportunity to design work, right? Could we create a form of computational organizational behavior to design in some of these insights and produce something that would reproduce the strengths of these team scaffolds, but could achieve the scale that crowds could produce? And that's what we're doing with these Flash teams. Flash teams are these modular crowdsourced teams of diverse experts sourced on demand from the crowd. They may never have met before. They may never even meet again. But for a short period, they are being sort of computationally scaffolded through a complex process to complete work like this. So at the highest level, we're talking about workflows. We're talking about tasks being handed off to one another. I'm going to start here, and then I'm going to show you why this starts to get interesting. So the process that I tend to teach, this is a little bit of an unrolled version of it. Normally you'd iterate, but it would look something like this. You'd produce a low fidelity mockup. You'd get some expert feedback, a heuristic evaluation. You'd revise the mockup. You'd produce a high fidelity prototype, and so on. I'm going to start parameterizing this in a few ways. All right, so I'm going to state what kind of expertise I need for each of those tasks. I need UI designers, I need software engineers, I need user experience specialists, and so on. I'm going to start producing a sort of controlled tag language for what I need. All right, well, I need a low fidelity mockup for this to work, and I'll produce some sort of revised thing, and it's going to take about an hour and a half. So now, if I know where I'm starting and I know where I'm trying to get, what I essentially need to do is build the yellow brick road in between, right? To convey inputs to outputs step by step to get to where I need to go. This is a little bit reductionist, but I want to actually make an argument that even this simple model can get you pretty far. So here's what a real one of these things looks like. Here's this napkin sketch design team. Again, we take these samples from my undergraduate class. Sorry, undergraduates. And then we convey them through low fidelity prototypes, heuristic evaluation, revised prototypes. We start building high fidelity prototypes, do a user test, revise the hi-fi prototype, and so on. Again, a sort of unrolled design process. Now, once you've done this, we can introspect on those team structures, hire exactly the kinds of experts that we need on demand out of this ad hoc team group of experts from the crowd, and then start conveying this team through the workflow, guiding their process. So, because these teams are computationally written, all sorts of interesting things become possible. This is a really deep shift, right? All of a sudden, a computer knows who's trying to do what when. How many of your teams have that knowledge codified somewhere? Because it's codified, we can do all sorts of things, right? It's modular. So we have these napkin sketch design teams. I have 1, I could have 3, I could have 10. I just need to hire more additional folks out of the crowd, right? So given different inputs, we follow the same scaffold. We can produce different outputs, hopefully at the same high quality. And then we can start to add some very traditional computer science tools, right? So if it's modular, well, we can combine them like Lego blocks to build larger organizations. Again, an entire organization that didn't exist yesterday might not exist tomorrow, but today is completing some very complex work. We can also think about sort of the traditional sense of elasticity. So instead of always having 3 developers, well, why don't we by default have 1 and then parameterize the team so that when they need to, mythical man-month notwithstanding, request additional help. Maybe I need extra help. Maybe I need someone with specific skills, like maybe you know Facebook APIs and I don't, and we really need your help, right? Maybe we could pipeline, right? So you have this very linear process, but you know what? If I'm an expert heuristic evaluator, I don't need you to show me the whole website before I can tell you what's wrong with it. Just give me 1 page, I'll start telling you what's wrong. And likewise, as I produce the low fidelity mockups, I don't need to wait until I'm completely done. I can start to produce some output for you immediately. And if we just have this additional bit of information, we can start to make it more likely that people actually can collaborate in real time by getting themselves in the same time zone, by essentially all working together. A bit more of an exotic property is creation by request. So let's say that you have the napkin sketch, but no, you don't want that working prototype. You want a video prototype. You want something that's just like an animated video. We may not have one of these teams already made for this kind of thing. But remember those structured input and output tags? We might have a bunch of individual components of different teams that could be strung together to create a new team that never before existed that can accomplish that. Turns out some very, very old school artificial intelligence techniques, known as action planning languages, can solve this kind of thing relatively efficiently. So if there exists a path from napkin sketch to video, they can find it and create that team for me based on the ones that it's seen. Now every team needs a team room. Unfortunately, most of the project management software out there isn't really made for this very dynamic, ad hoc, online world of crowd work. So we started building our own. It's called Foundry. Foundry allows for 2 things. 1, it allows folks to author these Flash teams, these structures that I've just been describing to you. And second, it turns around and helps to scaffold the process so that people can coordinate effectively. So if I were to author a team in Foundry, I would start by creating this series of tasks and workflows, just like I described before. The colored arrows essentially indicate dependencies of who's handing off to who. I indicate the roles. This indexes into something like 2,300 different types of expertise that are available on the Upwork platform. And then when I start creating a task, I can say, oh, well, I want these individuals to be involved and how long and so on. So now, zooming in, you might create this kind of workflow. You might be asking what's going on here. I'll zoom it in. What's essentially happening is that you can indicate that the logo designers might need to be in sort of synchronous collaboration with the hi-fi prototypers. When you're done, you say, OK, let's give this a shot. And Foundry, the system, will basically go out and hire off of Upwork the relevant experts. Now let's say that Martha comes in. She's a user experience, a UI designer. Foundry starts by highlighting the tasks that she's going to be responsible for here in yellow. She starts working on it, so it turns blue and indicates to the rest of the teammates what's going on. This would never happen with Martha, but let's say she starts running late. The system, again, can start to update everyone else. So it says, oh, she's running about an hour late. Make sure you come about an hour after you were planning to, and so on. And we can convey the task, the process through this kind of timeline. It's a very, very sort of restricted notion in some sense of what a real team would do. But what I hope to convey to you is that this is a first step toward a much different and richer sense of what's possible through these online teams. So, in sum, what Foundry is allowing to happen is the authorship of these structured and modular teams. They can grow, they shrink, they pipeline, they recombine, they can recruit on demand, and they can help maintain situational awareness. I want to give you a sense that this might actually have a prayer of working. So I'm going to show you 3 different team types that we've instantiated through Upwork. So the first one I already showed you, that's this napkin sketch design team. Again, we took 3 different inputs from my undergraduate course. And what happens is in about a day, 24 hours of active work time, somewhere 3 to 5 people, about $1,000 that we paid each of these teams, produce a working, functional, user-tested prototype. Imagine as a designer having an idea tonight and being able to come back tomorrow night to play with the idea. This is almost unimaginable today. But I think there are real opportunities. And these folks are real experts who've never met before, are coordinating toward this. Now, you're not going to put this thing on the App Store tomorrow, but as a prototype, I think it conveys a realistic sense of what's going on. Now, I can do design. I can't do anything about animation or video. But my colleague Terry Winograd was retiring, so we wanted to celebrate his career. In particular, a story in which he was making a computer in his garage when he was a kid. So just to give you context, this is what Terry looks like. He was actually my undergraduate advisor. If I were to use any adjective, it might be Einsteinian. So when you're about to see this video, what you're going to see is someone who looks like a young version of Terry, who is Terry building the computer in his garage, and then someone who looks like this Terry, who's Terry's dad, wondering what the heck his son is doing. So we worked with a director on Upwork to create this animation flash team, and then convene the team for about 48 hours while they worked through this process. And this is what they produced. So they looked over me for the Oscar, but maybe next year. Again, this kind of coordinated animation effort, we've really never seen at scale on the internet before. You've seen lots of very little individual pieces where I take this frame, you take that frame, but this integrated effort is, I think, a big opportunity. So we wanted to try and pull together multiple of these teams to do something really large and complex, like make a platform for online courses. So what we essentially did was take 3 of these design teams, one responsible for the home page, one for the course upload page, one for the course taking page, and we pulled them together. Then we took those animation teams, built a 3rd team, which was a curricular design team, where we would hire someone who is training in curricular design, like an education degree, and with someone who is a content expert. And we pulled them together and had them make 3 different short videos to explain a skill and then quiz on it. And again, within about a day, they were producing these videos for singing from the diaphragm, taking portrait photography, or solving this Towers of Hanoi problem, which is a sort of very canonical computer science recursion example. And these teams, again, were really, really coming together quickly and relatively effectively. Let me dig into a little bit what I mean by effective. First of all, after we did this work, Accenture started taking our infrastructure and using it to build some of their own internal systems. So they wanted to see, first of all, whether it stacked up to their own marketing department's requirements, which is perhaps higher than my marketing requirements, as well as to try and integrate this within a large organization. You can see they created a marketing video, a mobile application, and a business development video, all using Foundry and Upwork workers. And I'm not really one who can speak with much authority on sort of costs. What they did tell me was that essentially that it was something like 1/6 of the cost of their own agency estimate. Okay, I don't exactly know how to interpret that, so we started running an experiment ourselves. So we took folks out of Upwork, and we had these 22 experts, 6 different teams, half of them randomized into a flash team condition, half of them in some sort of self-managed team condition I'll explain in a second. And then we tasked them with making a party planning app, sort of a restricted version of this napkin sketch task. Gave them a shorter flash team, about 13 hours. So we removed some of the iteration. And then we measured how many work hours it took these teams to actually succeed. So if you were in the flash team condition, you saw something just like I described to you. If you were in the control teams, you were basically self-managed. It meant that you had a war room. So we gave you the same information. We gave you a big long block of time, and we said, typically when people do this, they follow this following process: A, then B, mock-ups, then heuristic evaluation, and so on. And then we just let them go. What we found was that the flash teams completed the same quality work in half the time. So what's going on there? What's effectively happening is that when you're in a war room, everyone is sort of trying to work together, in some ways productively, and in some ways stepping on each other's toes. You had designers trying to do coding, you had coders trying to do design, and so on. And what happened was that because of this, even the slowest flash team finished in fewer hours than the fastest team in the control condition. I've never before run a study with n of 6 and gotten a significant result. To which Stu Card told me he aims for 4, so science envy. What I take away from this is that by structuring the collaboration effectively through these team scaffolds, and in these ways essentially enforcing it through software, we were able to really get teams that were able to coordinate much more effectively. In fact, several of these control teams, people kept leaving. They would get so upset with the team dynamics that they would just give up. And then Foundry, sort of in a weird scenario, would just hire new people out of the crowd. It was a very odd dynamic. This did not really happen with the flash teams. So what I really would like you to take away is that we need to shift our worldview from this notion that crowds are these amateur, homogeneous, faceless people to a diverse set of individuals, such as yourselves, who bring expertise and backgrounds and the ability to tackle some really deep, complicated, and interrelated tasks. That is what I have to share with you today. I have much more to say. I think if this is a new mode of production, we need to also ask questions around what new forms of labor protection need to look like. I think we also need to ask whether these kinds of techniques, what we're starting to do, can support new kinds of research. We have hundreds of people around the world who are now working with me and my group to build a new crowdsourcing platform that builds them some more fair ethical labor practices and so on. So a number of opportunities here, but I will close just hoping to get you to think about the platforms for the future of work. Thanks.